The World Animal Protection Report has revealed that 7 global fast food restaurants that have set up shop in Africa do not adhere to the same animal welfare standards for their Africa markets as they do elsewhere in the world. The report shows that most of the chicken meat served at these well-known quick service restaurants comes from chickens who live in cramped, barren environments with wet, cake litter, poor hygiene and situations or sanitation, leading to many chickens suffering from lameness and skin diseases. To tell us more is World Animal Protection's Human and Sustainable Agriculture Campaigns Manager, Victor Yamo, all the way from Nairobi. Good morning, Victor. How are you doing?
Good morning, Barry. I'm good.
Oh, fantastic. Listen, why is it that so many global fast food restaurants that have set up shop here in Africa do not adhere to the same animal welfare standards compared to their counterparts in the rest of the world?
Barry, I think that's a good question. In our understanding, it's just a question of lack of understanding from the African consumer, which then allows the international brands that are setting up in Africa to then have a variation or differences in policies that they use or utilize in their production systems. And that is a critical thing that we as Africans need to look at and deal with.
And what can be done to ensure that these companies adhere to these specific objectives and targets?
I think that the main thing is, as consumer awareness is raised across the continent, consumers need to start demanding that certain standards be followed, because it looks a bit funny that there's a variation between what the same companies does internationally and what it does on the African continent. If you've read the report, the most interesting one is actually a South African brand called Nando's, which has made the same commitments the European firms are making in Europe. That is the better chicken commitment. But those commitments are not actually applicable in South Africa, which is their origin. And that's an interesting thing. The reason why those standards are important is because, as you just said when you started off, it's about the welfare of the animal, which is connected to the livelihoods of the people, connected to food safety. And those are things that are as important in Africa as they are in Europe.
Now, Victor, I read previously that that intensive farming methods also often rely on routine antibiotic use. How does this, especially with chickens, and how does this impact on our health as humans?
A very good question again. There is a connection between intensive farming, because you're putting so many animals in a small space. The thing then that happens is that antibiotics is used to hide, to prevent disease. By giving some subclinical dose of antibiotics, you can then prevent the flock from getting disease. The problem with that is that that antibiotic ultimately ends on your table. So essentially, the consumer is getting exposed to low doses of antibiotics. The same antibiotics are the ones used for treatment of diseases. And ultimately, what happens is that when the individual or the consumer gets sick of a certain disease that can be treated by that antibiotic, because they've been eating that antibiotic from the chicken or milk or wherever, ultimately they have developed some level of resistance to that antibiotic. And that is what is known as antimicrobial resistance, which ultimately means that that drug cannot be used to treat that infection in that human population. And globally, we are losing about 700,000 people annually from diseases that cannot be treated by non-antibiotics. And if that trend does not stop, it simply means that by 2050, it's estimated that we'll be losing about 10 million people from antibiotic resistance. And that is why, as an organization, we are saying animal welfare is important, because when the welfare of the animal is catered for, the chances of them getting sick is minimal. Then the use of antibiotics is not there. But if you also look at animal welfare from the perspective that you can then be able to give the animal better space, ensure that the hygiene standards are raised, that animal then does not need to be given antibiotics. Essentially what we are saying, and from research, antibiotics is being used to mask poor welfare in production systems, because that animal is being propped up, the immunity of that animal is being propped up by the antibiotic, which then negates the need to have high welfare production system. Hence the reason why we are pushing corporates to do the right thing, and we are hoping that consumers in spaces like South Africa can also demand that the brands that are selling selling chicken can also do the same thing.
Yes. Now you've mentioned that, but what can we as the consumer do specifically, in order to, get these companies to do better?
I think there are several things as a consumer can do. One is to use your purchasing power. Find out what the organization or the brand that is you are a customer to is doing. And that simply means reading, engaging them, discussing with them. Beyond that, you can also write to them. I know in certain populations or in certain markets that we've worked in, that consumers have petitioned organizations to do the right thing. They've petitioned the producer to do the right thing. They've petitioned the retailer to ensure that whatever they're stocking is the right product meeting certain standards. But also ask governments to do the right thing, because part of it is about governments adhering and implementing animal welfare standards, food safety standards that drive the process and the business that these organizations or these brands are engaged in. That way, then we are forcing, if we have sufficiently enough people forcing organizations to do the right thing based on their buying power, that then drives the animal welfare business at the farming level. And that's the important thing that we're asking as an organization.
Thank you so much, Dr. Victor Yamo, World Animal Protection's Human and Sustainable Agriculture Campaigns Manager, linking with us live from Nairobi this morning.